Yeah, he's
Old guys rock.
here. Yeah, Fred came. Here, my boss is here. Now you gotta be Yeah, you said you would share a little bit of it. I don't have to. Yeah. Alrighty. Well, thank you all for coming today. We're here, of course, to celebrate the legacy of our colleague, Brian Barry. All of you know him, so I'm not going to talk about his bio, because then you would just be hearing me talk about his accomplishments. And I think it's much more fun to hear us remember him. But he joined us in 1986 after serving on the faculty at the University of Chicago, Harvard, and Carnegie Mellon. And after the formal program, I hope you can take some time and look at a few of his books and some of his awards over there. The family has graciously donated his papers and his awards to the university archives, so future generations can study and appreciate them. I also want to welcome members of his family. We have in the back, we have his son Duncan and his wife Elizabeth. And we also have Brian's son Jacob, Di, and his wife Aurora. Some of you may remember Jacob because he and another grandchild were both students at UTD, and Brian was very, very proud of them. I also want to welcome some of his many PhD students here. In his career, he had over 150 doctoral students, 80 of whom graduated from UT Dallas. One of his students, Hakmin Kim, has traveled all the way from South Korea to be here with us today. So here's how things are going to go. I've asked Ron Briggs to talk with us about Brian's impact as a scholar. And I've asked Ted Harpham to tell us about Brian's storytelling, his intellectual curiosity, and his moral commitments. Two of his students, Rubia Valente and Agustin Plau, are going to share their memories of working with him as a dissertation advisor. Richard Scotch is going to come up and share a few words, and he's also going to read the messages sent to us by some people who could not attend in person but really wanted to participate. And then, Hakmin, I'm going to ask you to transition us to the open mic portion where people can share, and I know he's got some lovely remarks to share with us. All right, so Ron, start us off.
Good afternoon. I got back from Europe at 7 o'clock last night, so if I fall asleep, please wake me up. Well, maybe you might want me to stay asleep. Okay, Jennifer asked me to make a few brief comments about Brian's academic achievement. I'm sure this was said with much irony, since it's almost impossible to do justice to Brian and be brief. However, after a little thought, I realized there was really only one thing to say about Brian. It's very simple. He was the most significant geographer of the second half of the 20th century. In essence, the most significant geographer of the post-World War II era. So having said that, perhaps I can just sit down. That way you won't have to listen to me recite all of his many accomplishments, from being the youngest social scientist to be appointed to the National Academy of Sciences in 1976, to receiving the Voterin Ludd Prize in 2005, which is the geographic equivalent of a Nobel laureate. And for those of you who are wondering who Voterin Ludd was, if you're not geographers, of course, and maybe a few geographers, he was the person who named America in 1507. So, it was a while back, so perhaps you don't remember. I probably need to explain why I have said Brian was the most significant geographer, but perhaps I will set the scene by remembering my early encounters with Brian. In the mid-1960s, I was a geography major in the UK, and we would receive these reading lists. And all of them seemed to be dominated by this guy with this real strange name. Brian Joe Lobley Berry. We simply thought he was some damn Yank who was being imposed upon us to make life miserable for us poor undergraduate UK students keeping us away from the pub in the evening because we had to go to the library to read his books. Because remember, in those days, there was no such thing as online. Xerox or copying had hardly been invented, so you had to actually go to the library, dig out the journals, and read the articles right there and then. One of my second memories was a few years later. I was now a graduate student at the Ohio State University, for those Buckeyes who were here. I distinctly remember my advisor, Reg Golich, saying to me, "Brian Berry has a few faculty openings at the University of Chicago. You should apply." No way, I thought. I could never be on the same faculty as Brian Berry. His capabilities go so far beyond my own. He's simply too famous for me to be on the same faculty as he. So, here I am, 55 years later, having been on the same faculty as Brian, a too famous person for almost 40 years. So Brian, I hope I lived up to your standard, at least a teeny weeny bit. So, why was Brian so famous? Basically, he established a new paradigm for geography, a new way of defining the entire field. Prior to the Second World War, Richard Hartshorne's concept of areal differentiation dominated the field. According to Hartshorne, the role of geography was to identify the uniqueness of various areas comprising the Earth's surface and kind of explain, elucidate the factors underlying this differentiation. Brian was the leading voice in an extraordinary cohort of graduate students at the University of Washington in the 1950s. They call themselves the Space Cadets. They fundamentally rejected Hartshorne's emphasis on uniqueness and description as insufficient to establish geography as a true science. Instead, they advocated geography as the spatial science. Now, not spatial in the Texas pronunciation of special, but spatial as in location on the Earth's surface. And as with any science, its role was to advance and test theories. In geography's case, these theories concern the location of phenomena on the Earth's surface. And as in other more established sciences, testing required the application of rigorous quantitative techniques. Hence, the quantitative revolution in geographic methodology and thought was born. This quantitative revolution was another key component of the discipline's realignments brought about by Brian. Indeed, this may have been one of his more significant impacts, or most significant impacts. Hitherto, the quantitative analysis of data sets had been little practiced in geography, although there was definitely a downside to this quantitative revolution because it led to a sort of a major schism in the field between those dedicated to this approach, like myself and other geographers here, and those sort of philosophically opposed, or perhaps unable to master the mathematical and computational techniques which were required for this analysis. And so, as a consequence of the establishment of a new paradigm, the quantitative revolution, for 25 years, Brian was the most cited geographer in the world. In the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, if you went to the annual meeting of the American Association of Geographers, which he was president from 78 to 79, Brian was kind of like a supernova star. He kind of moved through the meetings with this phalanx of fellow space cadets beside him and this sort of meteor trail of graduate students trailing behind. But a little ironically, sort of personal fame may not last, because I kind of remember being with him in the late 90s at an annual geography meeting in Charlotte, North Carolina. We were standing chatting, and all of these young faculty and graduate students were just sort of streaming past, and they seemed, kind of unaware that this was Brian Berry, the person who was sort of established what they were all studying. However, be that as it may, Brian had already really played a key role in sowing the need for the next major development in geography. And this next major development has really dominated the field of geography since throughout the 21st century. This was the development of geographic information systems in science. Now, GIS is usually defined as a computer-based system for the collection, management, and analysis of location-based data. And along with GPS, which for the first time allowed location on the Earth's surface to be established precisely, easily, and cheaply, GIS really catapulted geography into the mainstream. It vastly expanded job opportunities for geographers, doubling the size of the AAG, for example, and really cemented geography's role as the science of spatial location. And Brian had a critical role in this. From 1976 to 81, he was a faculty member at Harvard, and he directed its laboratory for computer graphics and spatial analysis. And under his guidance, some of the very earliest prototypes of GIS systems were developed. SciMap, CalForm, Polybird. These were the very first efforts to use computers to create maps, previously a very laborious, labor-intensive activity, which I remember very vividly from my undergraduate days of sitting at this drafting board trying to draw these straight lines. But more significantly, one of his students there was inspired by Brian, a student by the name of Jack Dangermond. He latched on to the ideas of GIS, and he went back to his family landscape design business in California, taking with him a bunch of the developers of the software, and he established a company called ESRI. And that company is now, in essence, the Microsoft of the GIS world. Its software today underlies local, state, and federal government operations, the military, the private sector, and of course, much academic research. So, I started this tribute to Brian by stating that he was the most significant geographer of the second half of the 20th century. Most geographers would likely concur. However, I think far fewer recognize the role he played in geography's development in the 21st century. Indeed, it could be argued that his impact on the 21st century may be even more significant, although far less apparent. In the 20th century, his impact was primarily on the field of geography, where he played a major role in instigating the quantitative revolution and a major realignment of the field. But in turn, this quantitative revolution laid a foundation for the development of GIS, a technology in which he played a very major early role as director of Harvard's laboratory. And this impact of GIS went way beyond the field of geography. It impacted society as a whole. Consequently, it is reasonable to assert that his contributions were even more impactful, since they laid the groundwork for geography and society in the 21st century. He was simply the dominant figure in geography in the 20th century. In the 21st century, his earlier work provided the basis for a far broader recognition of geography and spatial science in society as a whole. Even though his role may not have been as visible in the 21st century, his legacy was immense and remains today. Thank you for your attention. I trust I did justice to Brian and almost met Jennifer's axiom of being brief. Just want to also note that if there are any misstatements here, they're entirely my own making. I didn't use AII to generate this talk. If I had, perhaps it would have revealed an even greater legacy than I was able to enunciate today. Thank you.
Hello everybody, how are you? Good? I am Edward Harpham. I am a professor emeritus now in political science at UT Dallas. I was also the dean of the Honors College for its first decade, so I'm very proud to be here. When I was asked to prepare a talk for this gathering honoring Brian, I found myself at a loss for words. What can I say about this remarkable man who had accomplished so much? One friend suggested that I discuss his contributions to graduate education at EPS, particularly the role he played in jump-starting our many PhD programs. But others are in a better position than me to talk about that. Another friend suggested that I review his many contributions to building the administrative structure of our university. But that too was a non-starter for me. My sense is that he pursued administrative duties out of a sense of duty and not love. I had the uneasy feeling that if I tried to praise him for his views on how to get a university to function optimally, I'd be haunted by his warning, Ted, the ideas and people matter, the bureaucracy doesn't. So let's talk about something else. Let's talk about something more fun. The stories he developed over time in his various capacities as a scholar and a colleague. Some of the most interesting stories involved the scuttlebutt he shared about his activities with prestigious organizations like the Academy of Sciences. You could hear what they were really saying behind closed doors. What did I learn from these stories? Surprise, they're dysfunctional and petty, just like we are when they're making decisions. And Brian was always in the middle of the conversation. Other stories came from his work in the 1960s with the inner city groups in Chicago to revitalize the urban spaces around the University of Chicago, which had really deteriorated. These were stories about the difficulties of using science in the real world. He has one wonderful story he told multiple times, but I have to share it here because it struck me as a side of Brian that we don't see often. In 1968, those delightful years of student rebellion, the SDS tried to establish an alliance with the local chapter of the black group, the Rangers, to stop urban redevelopment that was being brought in by the Center for Urban Studies at the University of Chicago. Turns out Brian and his close friend Jack Meltzer, later dean of social sciences at UT Dallas, oversaw these anti-poverty activities. In a show of force, the SDS occupied the center and Brian's office. I can only imagine how upset he was. But this was actually a research crisis too, because all his information, all his files were there. What would happen? Rather than joining with the SDS, the Rangers gave the SDS 15 minutes to vacate the center's offices, or else. So much for the alliance between radical socialist activists and the black community in Chicago. Discretion being the better part of valor, the SDS abandoned their occupation of the center's offices quickly, and the center got back into business with no problems. It turns out that the Rangers felt the Center for Urban Studies was the only organization doing anything for poverty in their local Woodlawn area. Interesting. Other stories about that Brian was part of came out of his vision of the social and behavioral sciences. This goes beyond what Ron was talking about. Throughout his career, he had an ongoing commitment to transforming geography into a scientific discipline for the public good. In this, he cultivated stories of the Enlightenment, That is, stories that were designed to demonstrate there was a truth out there to be studied, and that reason and science were the best ways to study the truth. Through scientific geography, he felt, cities and communities in our country and throughout the world could be made better and we could prosper. He was an Enlightenment man of the 18th century. His development of central space theory was exciting, laying the foundations, as Ron said, for modern urban geography, spatial analysis, and GIS, technical fields. They sparked much controversy and discussion among his fellow scientists around the globe about the value of science. He won numerous prizes. I won't go over them, but he won them based on his scientific work and his willingness to extend this beyond. I encourage everybody to read his autobiography to see all that he did throughout the world. When I first came to UT Dallas, and this is sort of the main thing I want to make my point, I thought his work in scientific geography was all well and good. But I was not much interested in refining the tools of quantitative analysis for geography or for social science. After all, I was a political theorist. I wanted to study Plato, Aristotle, and the like. What could we have in common? What could we possibly do together? How mistaken I was, not realizing how much he would influence my own thinking, not only about how the world worked, but the place of ideas in it. I was naive in thinking that I would never be brought into his orbit. Brian's office was just down the hall from mine, and I found that we had many common interests. It's amazing what working at a university and actually showing up, how it changes people. I've been on that bandwagon since COVID. He was also interested in things like not just technical developments, but the nature of democracy, of the tensions found in modern democratic societies undergoing rapid technological change. And he was interested in shifting ideas of liberty, equality, and justice and how they played out in the world. I found myself going down to his office every day to talk about figures like Adam Smith, Michael Oakeshott. He showed me how a quantitative geographer from another generation could help a baby boomer political theorist think and rethink the world of ideas that I was part of. One important idea had to do with Brian's long-wave work, which represented, I think, a move far outside his earlier work in quantitative geography. There was, he argued, a rhythm to economic life that pulsated through the economy since the founding that periodically redefined the contours of politics and policy in America. If he were with us today, he'd probably say, I told you so. You're dealing with the rhythms of that economic wave now. I read numerous drafts of his first book on economic long waves and the rhythms of the economy, and subsequently became part of his research team with a number of people. We'd get together literally every morning to see what Brian had been thinking about and adding our own comments, going off and doing our own work. I call his later work his post-geography work, but it too was based on rigorous quantitative scientific methodology as a starting point. But he was articulating a new story way outside the geography discipline. I think what he was trying to do was offer a way of thinking about capitalism and democracy that was an alternative to the views that we see offered by the lengthy list of political economists over the past 150 years. Men like Karl Marx, Joseph Schumpeter, and Keynes. What a joy for me to participate in discovering and helping to tell this story. As I see it, 4 factors enabled Brian to be so creative and so successful in his retelling of one story after another. First, he had a deep commitment to truth, which is hard to believe in the world we live right now, and to communicate the truth to others so that we could make the world a better place. He believed discovering truth, articulating truth, communicating it could make the world a better place. He had little toleration for those who thought everything was ideology or offered half-baked thoughts about what should be true rather than what was true. He had little time for postmodernism. Second, he treasured the virtue of hard work. He told me and my colleagues numerous times, you get out of life what you put into it. His motto on his autobiography, Nihil sine valore, sorry guys, got it wrong, but I tried. That means nothing without effort, adorned his family crest, which he created when he was honored with the title Lord of Ascoli in Kent. He was proud of that, this working class boy who was told he couldn't rise. Third, he was committed in his work to certain moral principles that he saw lying at the heart of the American experience. He valued liberty of thought, speech, and action. He thought books like John Stuart Mill's On Liberty and Michael Oakeshott's work and tradition should be studied by ambitious graduate and undergraduate students. He was proud of taking coursework in London when he was an undergraduate with Oakeshott. Ideas like these, he believed, freed individuals from, and this is important, I think, to understand his makeup, traditional social hierarchies like the British class system or bureaucratically imagined merit systems of modern Western societies. He was opposed to them all. He thought truth will out, merit should rise to the top. Bryan, like Adam Smith, was committed to the importance of markets to promote economic prosperity and technological advancement. I wasn't in economics or geography, I was a political scientist, but we read nothing like that in graduate school. I had to discover that after graduate school. Finally, and no less importantly, he was committed to the give and take of liberal democratic institutions. God forbid. He experienced firsthand in Chicago and in developing countries the messiness of getting things done in the world of practice and the value of democratic institutions that had the support of the people. Never abandoning his working class background, he rejected the easy solutions offered to social problems by British conservatism and the egalitarian promises of social democracy. Born British, Bryan was an American individualist par excellence throughout his career. One final moral trait I think lay at the heart of who he was and why he was successful. His generosity. That might surprise some people, generosity. That's a strange virtue to have, but he had it. His door was always open to graduate students who needed help or encouragement. Many of our best graduate students were international students whose mastery of English was always suspect. He made sure that they mastered English getting through the dissertation. He was the one who patiently and enthusiastically sat down with them, read multiple drafts of their thesis, some of you must remember this, marked up their manuscripts with his ever-present red pen, and made sure the product of all their efforts was something to be proud of. Bryan, everyone who worked with Bryan came to know to work with Bryan was to demand excellence of yourself. His generosity was not limited to his graduate students or to undergraduates who somehow got through the door of his office that was often guarded by Asia, or to colleagues who needed help on a thesis to revise for publication. I learned this firsthand in a personal way when my father asked me if I knew anyone who might be able to help him with his genealogy questions. In my dad's retirement, he worked on genealogy for almost 10 years and had reached a bottleneck what to do. Well, I knew that Bryan was working on his own genealogical research at the time, something for which he won another major national award. Surprise, that's another story. But yes, I asked Bryan, would he help my dad? How did Bryan respond? He invited my father into his office for a 2-hour conversation. 2 hours? I don't think I ever spent 2 hours with a student. Imagine that. Dad told me he spent as much time with Bryan discussing his genealogical work as he had done when he spent time discussing his PhD thesis with his chemistry advisor at McGill in 1951. And this is the person walking in on the street. For all Bryan's contributions to UTD and to academic geography, and to me as a political theorist, I kind of like to close with a coda to my family story about my father and Bryan and generosity. It turns out that our family and Bryan's family were from Pelham, England, originally, 100 years ago. Pelham's a small village near Nottingham. One summer, Jan and Bryan, his wife, went to England and headed to Pelham and took photographs of the church where its baptismal font, and many other gravestones bearing the name Harpham and then shared the photographs with my father. Jan's in some of these pictures, it's sort of fun. My dad was stunned by Brian's thoughtfulness. What an act to go up there and take pictures and make this available. Since my dad's passing, the matted and framed photographs hung on the wall of my office at home. Thought I could tell the story. Reminding me of Brian and my dad.
Hello everyone, I am Ruby Avalanche, and I was one of hundreds of PhD students who had the honor and joy of working with Dr. Berry. And in the spring of 2013, Dr. Berry actually was able to pull off first, and I was one of 9 PhD students who were included in the same semester by Dr. Berry here at UT Dallas. As we all know, Dr. Berry really won all the honors and awards of our profession. So when our paths crossed in the fall of 2011 in his dissertation seminar class, I remember before class I was terrified of being enrolled in that class because I had heard all about him and thought he was this amazing scholar, and I was just terrified. And all that fear went away when he walked into the door. I remember him smiling, upbeat, warm, so funny, and so down to earth. And he connected with us on a personal level just instantly. With time, I came to learn that that was just who he was. From that semester onward, I really had the joy and privilege of working with him, first as his PhD student, later as his postdoc, and in more recent years as his colleague. He was a morning person. I am a night owl. So our collaborations worked really, really well. I would stay up late until 3 a.m., send him a manuscript via email. By 5 a.m., I would get a response, received. Sometime around 9 a.m., I would receive another note that said, "It's in your desk." And I would go to my desk, and then I would find his revisions. And I remember the first time that I received a manuscript revision from him. He printed my draft, wrote all over it. It was all red. And some parts had been cut with scissors and glued in yellow paper. He really loved those yellow paper pads, loved them. And the time and attention that he put into that revision was something that I had never encountered before. He never sent a digital version. He always sent a physical copy back. And they were so detailed and so beautiful and elegant in a way that I never had the heart to throw them away. They are actually all in my office today. Yeah. In retrospect, I should probably have been really embarrassed by all the revisions that he was asking me to make, but he never made me feel that way. He never made me feel ashamed. On the contrary, he would just smile and explain how this paragraph would go better here and how the paper would flow. But even little things like explaining that, okay, you should use who for people, that for things, and things like that. It's really just to show the type of person that he was. He was such an amazing individual. And so knowledgeable too. And he had amazing life stories. During our weekly meetings, he would often share those stories. What it was like growing up during World War II, and how even though he was just a boy, they let him work in the ambulance brigade, and that he actually helped people. There was a bomb that fell on top of the town cinema, and he was there and helped people. And then more interesting stories too, about jumping from moving things, and how the Russians never really caught up with him. And I was convinced that he was an MI6 undercover agent, which, by the way, he never denied or confirmed. And every time I would bring that up, he would just have a really good laugh. He would laugh and would laugh. He had the best sense of humor. He always seemed to be in on a joke that he wasn't sharing with anyone else. And it's funny though, because sometimes he did share what he was thinking. It was really, really funny. But what I would like to highlight in these brief remarks is really an aspect of Dr. Berry that I experienced firsthand, which is his kindness and his generosity. I agree with you. This was something that always stood out to me, how he was generous with his time, his knowledge, his patience, his promptness to respond, and how he demonstrated that through his actions. When he learned that my husband loved to cook, he started bringing eggs from the farm. Chicken egg, duck's eggs. He even introduced us to shepherd's pie, which he loved, and myself as a Brazilian immigrant had never heard of. My husband and I, we had what's called in academia the two-body problem. We're in the market trying to find academic positions at the same time. My husband had a PhD in computer science, and I was already a postdoc working with Dr. Berry. And we had several offers and we didn't know what to do. So we went into Dr. Berry's office. And he sat down with us, and he went over the cons and the pros of each offer we had. We had 12 of them. It was a lot, so he spent a lot of time with us. And even though my husband had an offer in New York, and I didn't, he said, no, look, this is the best choice for you. It's the best choice for your family. Don't worry about your position. You can still collaborate. You can go to New York. You can stay on as my postdoc. That's not a problem. But that's the best thing for you, and I'm sure you'll find something in time. You'll find something there. And we followed his advice. We moved to New York. Over the next few months, I would send him paper drafts via email. He would print them, do the whole thing again, but send it to me via FedEx. His premonition was correct. I was able to get a position at Princeton, and then a position at Baruch College, State University of New York, where I'm a professor today. But this really just shows the type of person that he was, how kind and how generous he was. When I told my mom that I was going to be talking about Dr. Berry here today, my mom, who only met him once during my quitting ceremony, heard me talk about him for so many years, said, make sure you tell them about his benevolence, the way he expressed kindness through his actions, helping you become who you are today. Brian has changed the world for a better place. Brian has changed the world for the better. I am a better person for having known him. He touched the lives of so many students and so many people. And I did speak with a few of people that were in my cohort about speaking here today, and they all said the same thing, how wonderful he was, how generous he was with his time, and what a huge impact he had in their lives. I'm sure that each one of us here today will also probably have a story to share about Brian and how he touched your lives in a positive way. Through generosity, to kindness, and always with a sense of humor. I would like to invite you to share that later when we do have the open mic. After I moved to New York, I came back to Texas a few times, and every time he would make time to see me and to take me out to lunch so that we could catch up, we would talk and see how things are going. He would give me advice about academia, and at the end, anytime we would say goodbye, he would say, oh, goodbye, I'll see you next time. He would always look at me and say, keep smiling. I was blessed for having had the privilege of knowing him for so many years, for having had him as an advisor, as a mentor, and as a friend. For that, I'm going to be forever grateful. I will miss his easy laugh, his wit, his remarkable intelligence, his genuine humility. My heart goes out to Jen, to his family. Ryan's memory will always be a blessing. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. And he continued after Rubia. He did quite a lot of interactions with the next students that he had. I had the privilege of knowing Dr. Berry as my mentor, as my advisor for my dissertation, and even as a colleague in one dissertation company. In all three phases, his guidance, his diligence, patience, and most importantly, his confidence he deposited in me were invaluable. I remember a time early in my dissertation process when I was completely overwhelmed. I had hit a wall with my research, and I was convinced I wasn't capable of pulling all that piece together. I went to his office, ready to admit defeat. But he didn't let me. Instead of giving me the answer, he simply looked at my work, then looked at me, and said, "Victor, right here. I will give my comments in a couple of days." Then the magic started. His unique editing processes, what we have heard from Ruby. Cut and paste, cut and paste. You want to see that? The yellow pages with cutting and making sense of all my nonsense. This is big of so many things. His thought process, finding key information, and the ability to connect ideas that did not make sense at the beginning. But you already knew this, right? We all knew about his capabilities. And we have heard everything about it. But what I want to highlight is his dedication to our projects, to our student projects, to my project. The time he spent doing this, right? Show again, not all advisors can do that. And I am sure, I'll just confirm with Rubia's husband and now in her speech, it is to all students. We all know from his extraordinary career as a geographer, academic roles, the number of publications he produced, recognitions, awards. But to me, his legacy is in the countless students he helped guide to success. I did not know the majority of them. From Washington, Chicago, Harvard, Pittsburgh, of course, UTD. I consider myself blessed to be one of his last PhD students that could enjoy his wisdom, his temperance, and extraordinary humblessness with students' formation. This side, please pardon me if I show my back, but I need to direct to that bill. Thank you, Dr. Berry, for touching upon my life in a way that no one in my family or in my professional career could have done. Your example in my recent academic career is and always will be in my heart, being eternally beholden to you. Forever grateful. Thank you.
I'm Richard Scotch, professor of sociology, now emeritus, last week. And my job is actually to read several statements that several of Dr. Berry's students sent in as they wrote in. I cannot do that until I just have a few very brief remembrances of Brian. I was actually an undergraduate at the University of Chicago, as a student of his, in a course called the C. Maybe that was why I was asked to read the student. But two other things stand out in my mind. When my daughter was in elementary school, Brian and I were on the same corridor as Ted, but not quite as close in terms of working together. But I mentioned to him that she was collecting stamps. Of course, he got correspondence from all over the world. And for a couple of years, he would save the stamps from all of these letters that came from colleagues. And he still wanted to leave it to my daughter. It was so thoughtful and generous for someone he was not really close with. I also remember when I got married, someone from outside the university, we invited all the social science faculty in the School of Social Science to a celebration at the Sons of Herman Hall on the DL. The most elegant dancers at our wedding party were Brian and Jane. It was really special watching them. But let me read these letters from the students and emails. The first, there are four. They're all good. The first is from Dr. Nimala Cherukapala at the University of Chicago, who writes, "We have office space at the Center for Urban Studies if you like," said Dr. Brian Barry at the University of Chicago. I had attended a seminar run by Dr. Brian Barry, and when it was over, he inquired who I was and offered the office space. I took the offer. Thus began a lifelong mentor relationship. I was a grad student at Harvard, spending a year at the University of Chicago at the invitation of the South Asian Studies Center. I was lucky enough to be on a fellowship from MIT Harvard Job Training Center, and my advisor, Simon Kuznets, was to be away for a year. I decided to spend a year at the South Asian Studies Center at the University of Chicago, so I moved to that desk at the Urban Studies. Brian was a generous man. He went over my dissertation proposal, spending a lot of time. I was going to use Indian data. He warned me of the pitfalls of using Indian data and would monitor my work on a regular basis. He and Jan had regular get-togethers for grad students several times a year at their home. Jan, an enthusiastic hostess for all these students, so we had great food and good company. I returned to Cambridge at the end of the year. Brian, ever so generous, agreed to fly into Cambridge to preside over my dissertation defense. We kept up our correspondence. He even invited me to attend a conference in India when I was teaching at the University of Waterloo. I will always cherish his mentorship, especially when, as it happens to graduate thesis writers, one gets stuck. The second, okay.
We're live streaming.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. This is from Joey Eisenberg, University of Wisconsin-Madison. I met Brian in 1987 in Wisconsin. I was a grad student in demography. It turned out we had a shared interest in conducting value-free research and the politicization of the academy, viewpoint diversity, etc. All the hot issues of today. So it made sense he went into administration. It was germane to me then because some politicized grad student gatekeepers were blocking my access to academic computing resources. They did not like my theoretical approach to a proposed master's thesis on the welfare magnet debate. I was pissed about it then, and I'm pissed about it now. Brian helped me out with suggestions as a sounding board. Long story short, I got fellowships to UCLA and UC Santa Barbara for PhD study and spent a semester at each place before calling it quits on academia. I called Brian every time I had a decision to make, and he was very helpful, suggesting people to meet in geography and land economics at UCLA, etc. He was very bright, into a lot of methods and disciplines. He was a really interesting academic and a vanishing breed in that whatever his political beliefs and values were kept to himself. In his research, he followed the data and came up with objective, value-free conclusions and recommendations. The third is from Dr. Philip Reese, the University of Chicago. I was one of Brian's master's and then doctoral students in 1966 to 1970. I was very grateful for his support during those 4 years. I enjoyed my visits with my wife to his family home in Park Forest, a Chicago suburb, where he proudly showed us his vegetable garden, reflecting his English roots in the county of Lincolnshire. Brian and his wife kindly accepted our return invitation to the lowly apartment that my wife and I occupied near the Hyde Park campus of the University of Chicago. Brian Berry is one of the most published and cited geographic scholars of the second half of the 20th century. His work helped ignite a scientific revolution in geography and urban studies in the 1960s. And finally, from Dr. Emmanuel Alexandrakis from the University of Texas at Dallas. Unfortunately, I live in Athens, Greece, and it is a bit complicated for me to physically be there. It's so hard to be able to capture the contributions of the late Professor Berry. It was a multiplying force that has shaped data-driven policymaking and planning throughout the globe. He shaped ambassadors of his scientific legacy in many disciplines and taught us new ways of processing knowledge. Professor Berry lives through us that were his students. He was my PhD faculty advisor and offered me more than I can describe in words. I'm hopefully continuing teaching knowledge to others, and especially my university students. And that is all that I think all of us here can continue his legacy of working with our students, with our colleagues, with our friends. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. If I start to talk, I should greet my great mentors here. Dr. Scott, Dr. Champagne, Dr. Briggs, Dr. Halpern. They were all my mentors, like Dr. Brian Berry. Actually, Dr. Halpern introduced Dr. Berry when I was undergraduate students. At the time, he was the dean of undergraduate programs. I was going to east to Boston or some universities in Pittsburgh or Philadelphia, but he told me, why do you want to go there? We have a Brian Berry here. So you can continue your study as a master's program and PhD program. So that's how I became a professor and later policymaker in Korea. So I really appreciate my time with you here. Let me read what I prepared today. It is my honor and privilege to stand here today to pay tribute to a giant in our field, Brian Joe Lovely Berry. In the presence of his distinguished colleagues, his devoted friends and family, and his grateful students. Let me introduce first myself. My name is Hak Min Kim. Some American friends at the time called me Hak Min Kim, but that's not correct. Some bad guys called me Hak. My name is Hak Min Kim. Some Arabic students call me Hak Min Kim, but correct one is Hak-Min Kim. Dr. Berry always pronounced very correctly, Hak-Min. I remember his voice up to now. I served as a professor emeritus in Suncheon University, Korea. I also chaired the National Assembly's Ethics Investigation Committee in Korea. So I'm killing the congressman of 300 people in Korea. Is that a joke? Nobody laughed? Oh, I failed again. But those titles mean very little today. Because today, I speak to you in my truest identity. I speak to you as a student of his time, as a student who got a lot of grateful things from him in my entire life. We have 150 PhDs from him, whose lives Dr. Berry touched and transformed. Professor Berry, I read the books when I was here. Also, many books I assisted him as a research assistant. I was lucky because when he was age of 50s, I think that's the most active academic kind of career in his life. As you heard today, quantitative revolution in the 1960s and 70s, and he changes research topics to the real social sciences, long wave theories. At that time, I was working for him. So that's why I'm very lucky to be a student when he was 50s and early 60s. Professor Berry, I met you today again. I miss you. I miss you deeply. I first met him at UTD in 1989. I was just a young senior student in the fast track program, still uncertain of my path. And in that very first class of development economics, the map of my life changed. He opened my eyes. He taught me to see the order of space. More importantly, to see the people in the space. He did not raise his voice. He raised my standard. He never demanded loyalty. He earned it through the integrity of his research for truth. I remember so clearly my first assignment as a teaching research assistant in 1990. He said simply, count how many times my papers were cited last year. That was my first assignment as a research assistant. So I went to the McDonald Library, searched the Social Science Citation Index, and proudly reported him 273rd. But he was not that happy. He just smiled and asked me very gently, why assume only social sciences? At the time, I was just graduated from the undergraduate program, brand new master's students. So I was so embarrassed. I wanted to hide somewhere. So I went again to the library. I added 60 more from the Art and Humanities Citation Index. And when I came back, he's still not satisfied, but smiling. He said, Hak-Min, disciplines are all connected to each other. Stunned. We are social scientists. And he added articulability, citation, this, what else? His voice was very soft, but the lesson was powerful until now. So I went once more. On the first day, I went to the McDonald Library from Social Science Building 4 times. So I found 53 more in those Science Citation Index. And then I thought about, if I go back, there's going to be something more. So I was trying to search something else, probably engineering or medicine. No doubt. There were 18 papers cited from engineering citation index and medicine science citation index. We couldn't believe it at the time. And then I came back, went to listen, and then reported to him, Professor Berry, the total count for 1988 is 401. At the time, if we have a Google Scholar, it's not an easy job. At the time, there was no Google. So I count every citation index, it was 401. But surprisingly, it's the same number when I saw Google Scholar. And he looked at me with kindness in his eyes and said a word that I never forgot. Excellent. You heard his voice. Excellent. So, time to time, I tell my students in Korea, excellent, excellent. That's the word we grew up. Those excellent in his voice, I carry on to my students. In one short morning, he expanded my world. He taught me that knowledge does not live in a box. It crosses boundaries. Good questions can break our assumptions. From 1990 to 1994, I had the privilege of working at his side as a research assistant. We published 4 papers. He guided my PhD dissertation, as many of our colleague students said, with red pencils in margins. His endless patience, and always same invitation. Let's look again. In 1994, I earned my PhD and returned to Korea. For more 3 decades now, I have worked in regional economics and innovation policy as a professor and as a policymaker. Due to his effort in UTD, we have 7 Korean PhDs from him. So we have all get along together. They are very successful in academia as well as in public sector. So I'm kind of representative of all 7 professors and public servants in Korea to tribute our great leader, our great professor. But through all the procedures in life, I have carried his voice with me, still building bridges across disciplines, still seeking better questions, still searching for truth. When I heard his passing on January 2nd, I felt as if the air had left my lungs for all day long. Today, standing here at UT Dallas, where my academic journey began, I can finally say the words I longed to say then. Thank you, Professor, for the questions that honor truth, for the standard that inspire courage, and for the law that makes scholarship human. Your lessons live on in my students, in the work we do for our community around the world, and in my resolution to keep asking better questions. Dr. Berry, rest in peace. Your map still guides our steps. Forever, your students serve. Thank you all. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right, so I wanted to invite anyone else if they'd like to come up and share a few words. Yes, oh, Bhavani, absolutely. Let's see. Is it okay if I move this over? I don't know if you know, but Bhavani and Brian were close. Step away from the speaker there.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. So I'm a professor of computer science at UT Dallas, and I've been here since 2004 October. And so I met Brian at one of the, we used to have a McDermott about the library, 4th floor, I think. We used to have those events that Dr. Willenthal and various other people would host. And so I met him there, and my husband, he was in Boston, but we used to commute, so some of the times he used to attend also. And we had sort of a special link, because Brian is originally from England, and I did my graduate work at the University of Bristol. And my husband went to high school there, and then, went to the University of Cambridge, so we have got a connection. And then we learned that Brian had some sort of a lordship title. And so every time I see him, I say, "Good evening, my lord." So he used to get an actual curtsy to him. And then he would, he would get so, I don't know, he used to be very amused. And so, and then when I referred to him, to my husband, I would say, today I told him, I emailed him, I have to go to my lordship's, or his lordship, I don't know, his lordship's memorial. So, okay, so that was sort of the fun part. But Brian, my connection to EPS, we do a lot of joint work with Jennifer and Patrick, a number of projects that we have worked together. And so my connection to EPS came from Brian. Actually, we had a joint project. When was that? A long time ago. It was like 2006. It was on geospatial, NGA. And so we wanted to work with someone from EPS. And so Brian introduced to Dr. Kim. Not Sancti, I can't remember his name. Sang-Chu, not Kim. Sang-Chu. Right, so he was a co-PI. Latifa Khan was the PI, or myself and Latifa, and then, so that was our initial interactions with EPS. So that was from about 2006 until about 2009. And then our sponsor from IARPA, Intelligence Advanced Research Projects Agency, he said that UT Dallas was developing something really unique on monitoring the GDELT database. And so I wanted to get more information. And so again, I talked to Brian, and then Brian said to talk to Patrick. He introduced us to Patrick. And so we talked to Patrick, and then we started writing proposals. And Latifa and Patrick, that collaboration started in 2013, and it's still continuing. It's after how many years now? 2013, so at least 12 years, they have a very fruitful collaboration. And then I wanted to get involved more in policy and learn more about policy. That was, I think, 2014. And then Brian introduced me to Jennifer. And so Jennifer and I started sort of a collaboration. Then Jennifer worked with, who was that? Alvaro, joint project. And then we have 2 joint degrees now in cybersecurity between CS and, with EBS and CS. Cybersecurity for technology and policy. One at the master's level. Now we're just starting the undergraduate program. So I would like to thank His Lordship, Dr. Brian Berry, and for this very fruitful collaboration we have had, and for his mentoring. You know, although I didn't interact with him as closely, but the few times I've talked to him, he's been also a very good mentor. Because first when I came to Dallas, everything was so strange, and so then I was talking to Brian. Because the next day I called my husband and said, you know, he was in Boston. I said, oh, I want to be here. He said, well, now you can't. You've joined them, so you've got to stay at least 1 year. Then 1 year turned out to be 5, turned out to be 10, 15, now 20. I think I'm going to be here forever now. So, and then Brian was one of those people who sort of mentored me and motivated me. And I've always been so motivated by Brian because he was always doing things, working and writing papers, and such a brilliant man and a scholar. So I just hope that I can have, you know, 20 more years of career so that I can, you know, at least do a little bit of what Brian has done. Thank you very much, Jennifer, for this opportunity. Thank you.
Quite a good example of how broad you went. I'm going to start with Ben, then we'll pass it back to you. Move back to the center.
I'm Daniel Arce. I have 3 quick remarks on the program head of economics. Not very long after I came to UTD, Brian asked me to be the program head of economics, and so I knew him as a colleague, friend, and dean. But one of the things that I learned quickly when I was in meetings with him as a dean, and there were others there, is that once you saw that Cheshire cat grin, you did not want to be at the end of what came out of his mouth next. And he was a very egalitarian guy, which was why we don't have any titles on our names outside our office doors. He was very insistent upon that, and it continues to this very day. And the last thing was my first exposure to him as a dean. When I came to the university a week, 10 days before the semester was about to start, I came in, got the key from my office from Nicole. Brian walked out and said, let's go down and see your office. So we went down, looked at my office. There were plenty of bookshelves there. There was a desktop sitting on the floor and absolutely no furniture. And my furniture was on order. And this is what the dean did. He looked at me and said, come on. We went to some other room, I don't remember it now, grabbed a desk, and he and I, the dean and I, carried the desk to my office. And that was how I learned what kind of guy Brian was from that moment on.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, I remember he once told me I could steal some chairs out of the conference room. Got sideways with the Spice Dean on that, but anyway.
Thank you. My name is Sunday Ogajulu, who's originally from Nigeria. And didn't know if I would have opportunity to say more. So I had prepared something, but I just want to share a few things. In Matthew 5:16, it says, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your God who is in heaven. Today I stand here to say that Professor Derek Bryant's light has shone so long and so far and wide, globally, that so many people have seen, are seeing, and will continue to see based on his enlightenment, and his contribution. My quick story about the red pen is that 1986-87 I had just completed my exams for the political economy program here at UTD, and he had just come in to develop the program. Coming from Nigeria and himself coming from UK, UK was the colonial master of Nigeria, and went to school, in missionary school, taught by a lot of missionaries from UK. So I was excited and elated that he was assigned to me as my professor to supervise my thesis, So I was like, okay, so I went to his office for the first time and we sat down. He asked me what I was going to be doing. I told him it's regional economic development. It's like, wait a minute. I remember his name. That was when it dawned on me that this is the guy that has it all over his name that I had actually looked at. So I was scared at first, and then and there. But he calmed me down with his goatee. He was always touching it like this and telling me to come here. And I thought, what is it I'm going to contribute in this area? So then about we started, and he said, I would like you to write like 3 to 5 pages a week. I put it in my mailbox, I would look at it, and then you're gonna do what you need to do. I said, yes, sir. So I stood at his office, I said, wait a minute, he's asking me to write 3 to 5 pages a week? I can do 30 pages a week. So my first attempt was, I went ahead and wrote about 25 to 30 pages and brought it in. So I kept it in his box and was moving around. He went to the dean's office and all that, did a whole lot. Then came right back within an hour or so. I saw my paper that I put in his box in my box already. So I picked it up, I looked at it, just like every other person has testified. It was all red, arrows, question marks, crossed over. I walked into his office with it and with my jaw wide open. And he said, So the rest is history. Professor Brian Berry, you have made me who I become today. Gave me so much sacrificially by taking the time to work, to teach me, to direct me, and to show me. Professor Brian Berry knew every member of my family. He knew my son's first name, my wife. In fact, when I defended my dissertation, my wife was 8 months pregnant. She was sitting right in the front, and that's when the last funded, and he encouraged me. The day I defended my dissertation, because of his name and because of the quality of work that he instilled in me, I had already, before I defended my dissertation, I had already sent some synopsis of my dissertation to World Bank and to IMF and all that. Just after my defense, and they had just said congratulations, I got a call on the intercom to come to the dean's office. And when I got there, I was given interview by World Bank and IMF together. And I did go to DC, I did interview, and I was actually offered a job with World Bank. And I did work with World Bank briefly, just for like 3 months. So I just wanted to put that to say the quality of his effort, the job that he did in every student. Every student here and out there will agree with me that when he brings in and embraces you, he just doesn't instill academia in you. He just doesn't instill knowledge in you. He actually takes you on a journey journey of life. And today, I'm still walking that journey of life that you put me through. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Anyone else? Yeah?
So my name is Ying. I think we are the classmates with Rubia. I didn't prepare anything here, but I just want to share like the feeling. I was an international student, and I was very blessed to join UT Dallas with Dr. Holmes, with Brian. So I was very touched by those memories, because those things recall a lot of things I thought I already forgot, but everything is in everyone's mind, in everyone's memories. I remember the accident. I remember those paperwork from by the advisor. I remember like he tried to use the simple English to help me to understand what he's talking about, because at that time I barely understand those languages. So overall, I feel really appreciate UT Dallas giving me the opportunity that me can like got my PhD degree here and help me to be a better person here. I remember last year when our advisor he got his 90 years old birthday. We sent an email to him, and he replied to me. I was very surprised and also very happy. We wish he can live longer, but we know he's always in our heart. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you everyone. We all know he said he wanted to fade away like the Cheshire Cat. But it was far too important to us to let that happen. We wanted to honor him and the impact he made. Before we turn to refreshments, I'm delighted to share that one of his former students, a generous donor, has stepped forward to create a fund in his name to support doctoral students in ours. It's a meaningful way to carry his spirit forward and extend his legacy to the future. So if you would like to contribute to that fund, we have the paper, there's a link. I will be making my contribution to that as well this year. But anyway, please join us for some refreshments. I'm going to toast Brian with a glass of white wine, which is always was his favorite, and I hope you stay and enjoy and share more memories of him. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, how are you? Good to see you.
So when I get going back Art was a long, long time ago. I'm not, first of all, drawing virtual. So 1990, I took as last year undergraduate class social psychology. I was in the textbook, specifically from the undergraduate psychologists from Berkeley. I took it as my supervisor. And his name popped up frequently. I think that was that's actually what he is standing. So I remember this. Using sensors data, using sector analysis, basically identify the structure of cities. What is important in the higher state? So it basically really trying to see underlying dimensions reflected in the status. So the first one is actually
Agora, o que eu fiz? Mandar um pouco?